Roy is the founder of BizDev Labs, a business development representative agency, or BDR agency for short, which is trusted by over 70 high-growth startups. Before BizDev, he was an Olympic class windsurfer and he studied at the Smith School of Business at Queen's University. We're so excited to have him on our podcast, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
So I'm super excited to hear more about your story today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and congrats on launching this podcast. So far you have really cool guests, so excited to see where you take this.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So just to start things off, I want to get a sense of what your childhood was like. So I know you were a big windsurfer. Tell me about what kind of impact that had on your life, and if you had any other hobbies, or you're dedicated to school, or what else was going on.
Yeah, I did try a lot of sports, a lot of different like I tried volleyball, hockey, team sports, individual sports. Windsurfing specifically, and the sailing that I've done it's a very complex sport. So I learned quite a bit. It also required me to travel a lot. So from a young age, I had to live in the US with my team and compete and train. I was like 14, 15. So put me outside of my comfort zone. And yeah, it was great opportunities. And I think competition is healthy for growth and learning. So
For
it
sure.
was fun. Yeah.
I'm sure that's very applicable to business as well, the competition and being competitive. So take me back to your final year at Smith. You're in fourth year, you're about to graduate. What were you thinking about doing after school? Did you know that you wanted to go into BDR, or were you thinking about something more entrepreneurial? What was your thought process there?
So entrepreneurship was definitely not on my radar during graduation or in 2019 when I graduated. I was looking at different careers to go into. Now, the way I did things is I tried different routes. So second year, I tried to do like asset management or banking. Third year, I tried to do some kind of banking. But very quickly, I realized where my skill sets were and if this was an area that I was going to win at, or if I should shift and try something different. So fourth year came around, I realized that perhaps finance wasn't the route for me, or consulting, which is totally okay. And that perhaps I should try something else where I could put like something that I could easily do because of my skill sets. So in finance, I had to work very hard to succeed. And I saw some people, it comes more naturally and easier to them. So I decided to make a shift. Not a lot of people talk about tech or BDR or sales out of Queens. And in general, I think it's kind of a niche to get into. But I saw it as a pivot and an opportunity to get into a role where it's performance based and that there's a lot of opportunities for growth. And I kind of took my shot and started applying to BDR role, even though when I applied, I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you talk about that skill set. What exactly were the skills that made BDR align?
Yeah, so it's very important to find a skill where you're really strong at. And I think everybody has different skills that they excel at naturally. They're born with it. I think you can make it stronger, but if you take your weaknesses and try to make it stronger, it's much more work. So the BDR role, there's no right or wrong answer, and you can continuously innovate and try new things. And I think with finance, it's about attention to detail and getting it right the first time. For me, I like things that are performance based, that are competitive, that I can keep trying, that there's every day is a new day. And it's like an infinite amount of tests that you can do in outbound, you just keep going. So that was something that I'm really good at. And I think understanding consumer behavior and patterns, pattern recognition, how people behave at scale, and understanding how people buy. These are all fundamental things now that are part of marketing and sales that even now I become more of an expert at.
You were a top performer in your very first role out of university. It was a BDR role. What do
Mhm.
you think contributed to that success and made you so good in that role?
Yeah, so I'm lucky because I had a really good team around me that were open to collaborating and teaching me. I remember like some guys really good at cold calling, the master of cold calling. Even today, if you heard this guy talking on the phone, he's very talented. So I was fortunate enough to be around a team that's very strong. But imagine you're in a room every day, you talk about your results in front of everyone, right? And it's like a competition. How many meetings did you book? How many meetings did you book? I remember when I started, I heard all the meetings and who won every time. And I'm like, I want to be that guy. So what I ended up doing, imagine like a chameleon, is I had to change my approach based on what's working. So I just copied the top people. And after I did what they were doing, but more volume, then I started like finding my own way. So I took what the best people were doing, I did more of it until I got it, and then I started like playing around with what works for me. That's basically what happened.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
imagine when you first get into a role like that, there's a bit of fear, or maybe you had a bit of fear when it came to sales at the start, or talking to customers, trying to sell people. How quickly did you get over that, if that even was a fear for you?
It's always a fear. It's like a big unless you've done it for a long period of time, not a lot of people have gone and cold called VPs and selling a product that they don't know yet because they're like young out of university. It's a fear, but if you have the right environment around you and you know that it's a natural, like you accept it, you understand that it's a part of the progress, then it becomes easier. And then just repetition. You do it every day and you notice that you don't get hurt by rejection. You
Hmm.
notice that, sometimes you actually get wins and those wins continue to motivate you. That kind of helps a lot.
Yeah, that's cool advice.
Mhm.
I want to switch gears here and now go to the entrepreneurial side. So, what kind of gave you the conviction to, leave your BDR roles and then start something on your own?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs. So, and I wish I was, because that makes it easier, because entrepreneurs know the feeling of switching careers and starting a business. There's a lot of fear involved with quitting a job and going into business. And you feel like if you do it, there's no reversing or going back. There's all these doubts. Fortunately for me, I was able to take the leap of faith. And the only reason I was able to do it is because my fear of doing it was lower than my desire to try it. Imagine like a graph, like I wanted it so bad that even though my fear was crazy high, I wanted it even more. So everybody would tell you that quitting and starting a business is not actually risky. You can always go back. Everybody will tell you all these different things, but it still feels scary and not real until like you just have to take the leap of faith. There's a guy, Alex Hermosi, who's like a very successful entrepreneur, like $100 million portfolio,
Yeah.
whatever. He talks about the fact he's done a lot in his life, and the hardest day until today was the day he quit his job. And he came from a consulting background. So as you can imagine, that leap of faith is the hardest thing to do, but it's also the thing that will propel you. You can always say like, that's the hardest thing I've done. So nothing is going to be as hard as doing that. So uh, luckily for me, I've done it, but I had a good friend that was very successful early on, actually a commerce grad, that showed me a new path. So they told me, Roy, you should check out this entrepreneurship thing. Like there's a lot of opportunities here. And I kept talking to him and I noticed that maybe it's the right path.
That's so cool. And I imagine you haven't looked back since you decided to take action on that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So diving a little deeper into BizDev Labs, tell me about how you found your first client, how you landed your first customer, and what that experience was like.
Yeah, it's very difficult to land your first few clients. Now, a lot of people would tell you to reach out to people that you know, to warm connections, and I think that's good. And you can always message people that you know and try to sell them stuff. But I do believe going in the cold route, reach out to people like you reached out to me, for example, we don't know each other. Reach out to people that you don't know and learn how to do that consistently. Building a business is all about selling something to someone. If you know how to reach out to someone and pitch them whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be perfect yet. But if you keep putting yourself in front of the right people, it's inevitable that something will sell or there's going to be some kind of exchange of value. So my number one skill set as a BDR was to connect to people. Any person I wanted to connect to, I knew how to reach out to them and start a conversation. So I just started doing that at scale when I wanted to sell my service, even though at the time I didn't know exactly what the service is going to be like. But I spoke to 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. Eventually somebody paid. So to close your first few clients, I would say get on as many sales calls as possible. That's it. That's the only measurement that will translate to your success. You don't even need to know your product. You don't need to know your service. Just get on calls. Something or someone will be like, hey, actually, I have a couple hours in a week that I need to outsource to you. Like, I'm very busy. What if you do it for whatever price? There we go. Might have just closed your first client. So that's how I look at it.
I wanna dig into your full like sales cycle here. So starting with like the outbound sales, so many students rely on cold email to, get the job that they want or talk to the people they want to talk to. The email is so important. So
Yeah.
what is your secret to this initial step of reaching out to a customer?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors, but volume is one of them. I feel like even the people that are looking for a job are still not reaching the volumes that are required to really have options on the table. Like if I was to look for a job today, I would reach out to like I wouldn't stop. I would reach out to so many people that maybe I have more options on the table now. I have more negotiation power. I actually find a job I like more. It's a lot of volume. I think doing emails is great. And I'm obviously big on social media. So are you on LinkedIn and
Yeah.
are you presenting yourself in a good way? But yeah, I think just it's like pure volume on LinkedIn as well, and actually taking the extra step. You can cold call people as well if you really wanted to. I'm just cautious. I'm aware of like not everybody's going to do the BDR role, so cold calling is a little bit different. But
Hmm.
I'm reaching out to all the hiring managers and trying to start a conversation, but not
And
like 10 people, like hundreds. You know?
yeah, yeah. And how persistent are you in your follow-ups? Because obviously you may not hear back from somebody the first time or even the second time. Do you follow up like a third and fourth time?
100% until I get a no or a
Yeah.
yes. Like, don't be annoying. Don't message every couple, like every day, like what's up, like But persistence is very important in anything in life. You never know why they didn't answer, or especially hiring is a cyclical thing. Maybe you follow up a month later and they're like, oh, actually, we are thinking about hiring now. So persistence in nice a nice way and not being annoying, I think is very important. Third, fourth time, it doesn't really matter. Um, it's
Yeah.
but it's important. So
And then obviously the goal of the cold email outreach is to, I imagine, book a meeting. How do you go about thinking about these meetings? Like, but when it comes to a potential client, I imagine you're not able to sell them on your very first meeting. How do you think about the number of meetings you do and what strategy you employ in each kind of meeting?
yeah, for me, it's a little bit different. I became sort of like a subject matter expert in the field that I'm in. So any call that I go on is not even a sales call, it's a consultancy advisory type call where I can just give advice on where I see the industry going, how I think they should sell, what I think they should do. And naturally, that translates to a potential engagement of us working together. But I'm the kind of person, I never come into a call thinking I'm going to sell or that's my number one objective. I just talk about my expertise, and I also sell at scale. Kind of, I do marketing on LinkedIn, right? I post quite a lot of content.
Hmm.
So people see that. So when they come and talk to me, they already have some kind of, we call it buying intent. They're already interested in what I have to offer. I don't need to come and tell them about it. They already know. So it's more about building trust because I'm selling a service.
Yeah, no, yeah, I guess you never want to come off as salesy and you just want to connect with the person. So that's
Yeah.
super cool that you've already built that or established that rapport off the get-go.
Mhm.
Um, Going back to the start of you building BizDev Labs, what were your primary concerns when you started this thing? Like within the first couple months to a year, were there certain metrics you were trying to hit? Or what were your goals out of these first couple months in BizDev Labs?
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns starting off. There's a lot of unknowns. There's still unknowns today, but I know how to deal with the mindset of not knowing because there's no clear path, right? There's no right or wrong. There's no like do this to be successful. There's a lot of variables in play to start off. And I always go back to fundamentals in business. It's like, just if you keep talking to potential clients, everything else works. So that's the number one metric that I think people need to really understand is how many, it's called like output into the world, is how much actual output, not like reading a book is input for yourself, but how much output are you putting into the world in order to get something back? So I'll give you an example. If I'm on the street and I'm trying to sell stuff, if I talk to 1,000 people and another person talks to two people, there's a direct correlation of success. So my number one objective starting off was just, that's the only thing I care about even today, is how many people do I get on a call with every single week. Obviously there's going to be quality things that I need to focus on after, or improving conversion or building, but these are, I built my business to a very sizable like revenue size without even a website. I didn't have a website, I didn't have anything. So this goes to show the power of like having conversations.
Yeah, it's a bit of a numbers game. Like the more people you outreach to, the better chance you have at, gaining a client or succeeding. What do you think makes BizDev Labs special? Like, why do clients choose your business maybe over other business development companies?
Yeah, it's a good question. The more I do this, also, the more I start to understand how we're different and where we fit into the market, because there's different, and I won't get into like the nitty gritty of like outbound, but I think there's numerous different factors. One of them is the types of companies we work with. So we're fortunate enough to have worked with really successful startups that are well known. So if I name them or they talk to the founder that has worked with me, I'm able to leverage that a lot in my conversations, which builds trust, right, and credibility. And I think that's a huge factor when you're working with a service provider, is that trust. So because I've worked with companies that are really well known, people trust me with their startup as well. They've known that I was able to help a company go from A to B, or whatever that stage that I was able to help out with. I think also the fact that I'm very in the weeds and doing a lot of the fundamentals myself. I never, for example, I grow my business the same way as I grow our client's business, and there's a direct correlation. So I'm never out of the strategy. I always know what to change, what to all these kind of things, which I think is very important. That's like a huge problem in the service world sometimes, is like you run a ads agency, so you do ads for clients, but you get your clients from a different way. There's that disconnect. So I think I'm very aligned and very connected to what we're selling. And I think the last part is I genuinely love what I do, and that makes me even better in that field, and people can sense that. So
Yeah.
it's a couple of factors there that I think are important.
Yeah, I imagine work is a lot easier when you have fallen in love with what you are actually doing. That's super special.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say, going back to like I don't know, some of the challenge maybe you've faced with BizDev Labs, have there ever been any major hurdles or things like setbacks that you can think of, or stories of that nature that you've had to overcome when it was not looking very good, when maybe the company was going to fail?
Yeah, if you saw what when BizDev started, nobody thought it was gonna. Even I didn't think it's gonna be anything big. A lot of doubt from a lot of people, including myself. I would say the biggest hurdle to starting is experience. Everybody told me I don't have enough experience, not enough experience in entrepreneurship, not enough experience in corporate. So without experience, there's no trust, right? People spoke. I was like 23 when I started, and I'm trying to sell the service. They're like, what do you know? You've just been a BDR for about a year and a half, and you're starting this business. So being able to talk about experience wasn't like a possibility for me.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had to do is revert back to, okay, so I don't have experience, so I'll charge less, or give me an opportunity to prove it on a commission basis, whatever. And then my number one focus for the first year, actually, BizDev Labs, was to build my experience through case studies, through working with clients, all these kind of things. So I actually charged less. So a lot of people are like, oh, you can charge more. Like they start negotiating on what they're charging at the beginning. I didn't care. I knew experience was my number one weakness. But imagine after closing 5, 6, 7
Yeah.
clients, now it's a different conversation already. So
Yeah.
that was the hurdle on how I solved it, I guess.
And how do you deal with those moments of self-doubt as an entrepreneur? Because obviously you might have good days of calling where you've landed a number of potential meetings, and then you'll have another day where you literally land nothing and you're like, this is gonna fail. How do you like detach emotionally? Because I mean, there's also employees who look up to you and they need you as their, mentor, and you can't really afford to be emotional and upset about how the day's going. So how do you like detach and deal with that self-doubt?
Yeah, like I said, it's like always cyclical and it always happens. I think even like very successful people will experience that at points, but with experience, you learn how to deal with it and cope with it. And you also learn that it's okay and you accept it, right? And accepting it is a big part. Accept that you have doubt and fear instead of trying to get rid of it or hide it. So it's totally okay to feel that way. For me, it's about, so like I said, in order to be successful, you have to put a lot of output into the world. When you're confident, when you're happy, when you're motivated, really push for output. But when you're struggling and you don't have the right mindset, that's when I go into input. So what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that, it's like, there's Gary Vee and all these like people that shove positivity. Listen to that. So if you're not confident or you don't have like you need more affirmations, so listen to that more. You need more of that than your fear, right? Or your doubts. So you have to keep listening to positive stuff. So I always listen to podcasts and videos of people saying you're young, it's okay, all these kind of things. Read books. Books are a great way of people sharing their story, and you can see that they've been there too, and hopefully you get some inspiration from there. And then surround yourself by people who won't judge you on your successes or failures. So I get to hang out with friends that never ask me how my business is going. Is it good? Is it bad? They're my friends regardless.
Yeah.
So I think, and your parents, like if you're in an environment where they can support you no matter what, then you realize, okay, my business is my business and I'm still the same person. So that's kind of how I've done it.
That's amazing advice.
Mhm.
And yeah, you mentioned like people you listen to through podcasts or on social media like Hermosi. Are there any other people you can like refer to our listeners that they can maybe listen to as well?
Yeah, I would say there's no specific person because it changes based on my phase and what
Yeah.
I need to learn. But I would say really like every month or every week, depending on how you feel and where your weaknesses are, you should be able to identify that and then find the person who leads that area.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want really tactical business advice, that's Alex Hormozy. If I need positivity, whatever, Gary Vee, right? And you should be able to shift. Also, books. There's mindset books, there's business books. So you need to be able to identify what you want to learn and improve on, and then put all your energy into finding the people who lead that area.
Yeah.
So it just changes, yeah.
Roy, I know we're almost at time here, so I will wrap it up with one or two last questions. What advice do you have for somebody who, maybe who's in university, about to graduate, or maybe a recent grad who has an interest in entrepreneurship, but they're not really sure where to start or what that looks like?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. The amount of stress and the things that you have to go through, although there's a lot of fun and stuff, but you really need to make sure entrepreneurship is for you. So having a good reason why you want to go into entrepreneurship is an important decision and thing to think about, because entrepreneurship always sounds cool, but there's a lot of sacrifice that I had to make and a lot of people have to make in order to be an entrepreneur. So that's one thing. But two is to realize that entrepreneurship is a different language. Imagine like in school and how you do in corporate and all these kind of stuff is one language. Entrepreneurship is an entirely different language. So
Mhm.
if you're close to somebody who's an entrepreneur, they will tell you the language. It's kind of like a secret language, or you have to go and you learn the language yourself. And the reason why I say that is because if you want to get into entrepreneurship, you can't go into corporate, which is one language, for 5, 10 years, and then think you'll become a great entrepreneur. It's
Mhm.
like how many years have you tried to learn the language of entrepreneurship? And the earlier you start, the better you learn the language. So if you're looking to get into an entrepreneurship, start trying to sell something or build something as early as possible. So like the podcast that you're doing, it started from scratch. By the way, I think like 90% of podcasts don't go above like one episode. You probably know that. So already great momentum. You're learning, reaching out to people, starting conversations. So build something and try as early as possible to get into business. It doesn't even have to be a huge business. It just needs to be some kind of transaction with people that you don't know, and you learn the process. So I think that's a big one. And you don't need to know too much. You just need to connect to people and see where things go. Let them build and give you ideas on what to do.
That's great advice. And then one final question here, Roy. What would you say is one of your biggest takeaways from all of this, just growing a company as a young founder?
Yeah, I think the biggest one. So Queen's Commerce was very difficult personally for me because you have one time to succeed, right? You have one test, one interview with a company. Everything is like one chance. And in entrepreneurship and what I'm doing now is unlimited chances. So basically what I mean by that is like, if we were to write a math test and somebody, there's always really smart people that get a 90 and let's say I get a 75, right? I would be the one that would go and write that test. Imagine you can write it as many times as you want. I would write it so many times that eventually I'll get 100, and most people will give up at 90 or 92 or whatever. So one, it doesn't matter really where you start. It matters how hard you try and how much action and how much you push. And then that there's no failing, they're just stopping, right? So it's like a race that never ends, that I can keep playing and keep trying. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I've learned, is that anything I want to do now, I know I'll get there if I keep doing it. So it's like a really big lesson that helped me.
Roy, thank you so much for taking the time today, man. Like that advice resonates with me. I'm sure it'll resonate with a ton of our guests. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for making the time and speaking with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you as well.